Well, and today it's our college lacrosse preview show with Patrick Stevens in studio with us here on GCR. And next up on the hot seat, he is the head coach at Johns Hopkins. He's Coach Peter Milliman, and he's with us now here on the college lacrosse preview show. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. Always appreciate you taking the time for us. Thanks so much for hopping on.
For sure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Coach, I wonder, obviously a year ago, a tough season for you guys. What does going through a year like that do in terms of how you choose to maybe rebuild a team, the way that you prepare? Is everything, hey, the process is good, or do you think about the way that you change the process when you go through something like that?
I mean, I think anytime you're going to see some struggle, you're going to have to reevaluate the process. Hopefully, you're doing that, when you're winning as well, and trying to make sure that you're not letting anything get stale and you're staying ahead of it. But we had some struggles down the stretch at the end of last year. Certainly, it caused some reevaluation and relook at the way we do a lot of things. I think more than anything, just making sure we're emphasizing the fundamentals, the basics, getting back to playing simple lacrosse and executing at a high level. And the better job we do that, I think the better lacrosse will play, regardless of who's on the field and what the situation is in the game.
Peter, how well do you think that your guys have embraced that, just in taking on the fundamentals and whatnot? And what have you seen throughout the fall and here in the preseason that kind of backs that up?
I think I've been really impressed with the leadership on the group since the end of last year. We have our first team meeting with the 2026 team as soon as, the seniors exit the room at the end of last season. And I think the senior group and the leadership on that team, really started to solidify a plan and an emphasis on what we're talking about right now, basics and holding each other accountable and, pushing that limit on a daily basis. I saw it throughout the fall. We even held off on picking captains until later in the fall because we felt like we were getting a good push from a large number of guys. We didn't want to, take that voice away from them in any capacity. So, we let that play through November. I thought, we really did a lot of work off the field in November to, emphasize those things. So it's not just the X's and O's. It's not just the fundamentals on the field, but, how we're integrating with each other, with the dynamic in the locker room, how we're maintaining, discipline in the cleanliness of our space and take care of our own business and showing up to things on time and, getting to know each other better. And I think that led to having a really good November. It was an outstanding version right there. And, we come back here and you're kicking, ice chunks off the field and you're just trying to, get going and keep the game as simple as possible because that's all you have right now. And I think a lot of those things are playing into where we are. So, there's always going to be, progress to be made. It's an uphill, battle to get through that all year. But I've been really happy with the way we started out that side.
Coach, you mentioned November. I was going to actually start with you with specialists, and I'll go to face-off because obviously replacing Logan Callahan there. I had heard that Dan Shepard had kind of been the guy that had jumped off the page a little bit in the fall. Is he the guy? Is that still something that maybe you'll be monitoring as we get into the season?
I mean, we're certainly monitoring it. I think Dan did a good job this fall. He had a good outing against I think it was Army. But we've graduating a guy that took about 95% of the faceoffs last year. It's unless you have another guy that can take 95,
yeah.
which is not usually likely. Then it starts to be a committee and a competition in the room, and that's what we're looking for. And I think we had some good battles, and we're going to continue to have those.
Peter, doubling back to the leadership idea with Quentin Kilrain as a junior, as a captain, just what has he kind of presented to everyone that makes him such a dynamic leader, and how important is he both on and off the field for what you guys want to do this year?
He's as tough a kid and a competitor as you get. So when you get that element from a teammate, from a leader, it really resonates with the guys. But the biggest difference with Quentin, and I think this is maybe the simplest way I can wrap it up, is that he's a straight shooter. Like he doesn't mix words. He doesn't overcomplicate the situation. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. Let's not waste our time talking about this. He really embraces those, basic elements of being a teammate and a leader. And I think the guys gravitate towards him. They all respect him. They've always liked his voice and appreciated his demeanor since he got here. And he's a true competitor. He'll own up to his mistakes right away and do the same thing with the other guys. And I think that's where, really from a leadership perspective, that's what resonates with them most. They feel like he's authentic.
Peter Milliman, Johns Hopkins lacrosse coach, is with us here on the College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, I'll stick on that side of the field, and I'll go. You have a goalie back who played a lot a year ago in Oren. Is he definitively the guy going in? I know you have one of the top prospects in the country coming in as a freshman. Is that solidified? What you're going to be doing between the pipes?
I mean, it's solidified when we get on the field and we're making plays and doing the right things there. We love Oren. He had some big minutes last year. He is certainly somebody that we could trust and depend on. We don't want to make anything a foregone conclusion, so there's always going to be a battle in the competition. Certainly with the influx of some young players that can compete, we're going to give them an opportunity as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Who are some of the freshmen that have impressed so far for you since you guys got back to campus in the fall?
On the offensive end, there's a Max Wickersham from the Philadelphia area. Has been very good. Attack midfielder, plays a little bit of both. Physical player and pretty consistent. Oliver Nolting out of Colorado. He's got a skill set and pretty dynamic ball mover. David Desquie is a midfielder. Got some physical dodger and shoots well. Parker Sorensen and Gavin Fitzpatrick, two defensemen that have some skill and some tenacity. Dash Lamedy, you mentioned, is the goalie that is a top prospect coming in. I think he's got a real high ceiling. We'll see how he develops. Alex Swinney is a freshman draw man from Lawrenceville. Been competing. Everybody takes some time to get settled in as a freshman, get to know the system, get to know their game, see how it fits in. Find a way to compete as hard as they can without, worrying too much about mistakes and stuff like that. It's just everybody's got a little bit different learning curve. That I would say that group. There's others too. Those are the ones that jump at the front.
Coach, from the outside perspective, a year ago, it seemed like just getting the ball in the back of the net was the thing that just maybe didn't continue at the pace that it needed to in order to be able to get some more wins in conference play. Is there a next level? I guess the dumb guy question is, how do you get more goals this season? And is it a process? Is it hey, we just need to shoot better? Like, how does that happen to get a few more goals this year?
Sure, it's a little bit of everything. We certainly need to shoot better, but the biggest factor for that is making better decisions when you shoot. You're not going to have a high shooting percentage when you take bad shots, and I think. We're victims of that at times. I think it's it's a sliding scale, so it's always going to be something that we're looking at and moving and working towards. We're not expecting to shoot 100% very often, but we're working towards it. We need to be a little tougher with the ball and attack the net a little bit, more physically and more consistently. And probably the most glaring one is we need to take care of the ball. We're not going to score a lot of goals when we put it out of bounds or we give it back to defense. So. Those are all important factors. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. And I don't know if I would put myself on record of saying anything specific X's and O's wise. I think it's really just the basics of what we need to do. There's a lot of things we got to reevaluate and make adjustments to from a schematic standpoint. But those are the big three right there.
Certainly seems like there are some pieces on that offense that are knowns. Guys like Matt Collison, Hunter Charvet, Charlie Eiler all come to mind. When you look at that group, do you feel like that is a good starting place for you, that you have some established guys that even if last year didn't go the way you wanted to, they've got plenty of experience and they're guys that know exactly what you're looking for?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think, you mentioned some big pieces. There's a few others with a lot of playing minutes, but, even some of those guys were we're on the younger side last year. Matt Collison's played every game since he's been here, but, Hunter Charvet spent his freshman year playing midfield. Charlie Eiler was in his first year of eligibility last year. He didn't really, he was injured. He didn't touch the field his freshman year. Same thing with Chuck Rawson, was a mainstay for us last year. He's, had 3 more years of eligibility. There's a few more of those guys in that mix. And Brooks English was coming off an injury. And so, he hadn't played much there's some experience there, but again, I don't want to reference too much last year, but that's what you're asking about. Like there were some elements of maturity that we had to work through and experience. And so I think, being a year older, being a year more experienced with a lot of those guys, we returned a bunch of them and giving them a chance to grow together. And like we said at the beginning of this, like really reevaluate what we need to emphasize, some of the basics and how hard we can stick to those.
Peter, we were just chatting with Sean Nadlin a minute ago, and it was interesting to hear him say that he thinks that the conversation might be shifting about the calendar. And we've just grown so accustomed to early February, or in this case, January lacrosse. We joke about the ice chunks on the field, but we're all seeing it. There's more weather in the forecast. Do you sense that the conversation is shifting and that there will be a deeper conversation to be had about the schedule, or are we just so entrenched at this point that this is how it works? We got to play these games and we can play them, that this is what we're going to be doing moving forward.
No, the conversation has to be had at a deeper level. We've hinted at it for a while. The issue is that a lot of it, underlying factor is tournament selection and how that factors in. So everybody needs to play, the toughest schedule they can, and you're going to risk that when you're playing 2-game weeks. And so if everybody's playing 1 game a week and you've got to play the hardest schedule you can, you just keep bumping it back so that you have a week in between each game. It looks like a football schedule, but 15, 20 years ago, not even that long ago, people were playing midweek games on a regular basis. If they weren't starting until mid-February, late February, and then they just keep shifting back. And I think the emphasis is that you can't risk playing a midweek game before, a big non-conference opponent on the weekend, and you can't risk playing a bottom 50 RPI team, because even winning that can hurt your chances in the tournament. So you end up with the top teams play the top teams and they don't play anybody else. If you beat the number 60 RPI team by 15, it hurts your RPI. And so until I think that's addressed, I think the other one is it's a factor, it's a discussion topic, but it's not something that anybody's gonna be able to move intentionally if it's going to have an adverse effect on your tournament options.
It sounds like you're saying it's a problem with no actual solution at the moment.
There are solutions, and we're working on them. I think those are conversations we've had them every year, and just simply moving the start date later, saying you can't play games until mid-February is okay, but I don't want the effect of that to be that teams play less games, because that's not fair for the kids. So we want to keep a full game schedule, and we just need to manage the challenges of who those teams are that you play. I mean, I play Towson on a midweek, and that's a tough one to play midweek because we're playing them before Georgetown or Loyola or whatever, and that's the only midweek game I have all year. And Sean's right. This isn't an optimal scenario for us, for the kids, for fans, anybody watching January lacrosse. But we're gonna dig deeper into that conversation, I'm sure, because this is not a lot of times you get a foot of snow dumped on you in Baltimore, but here we are, so we got to figure it out.
The danger is there might be more. That's the
rumor.
That's the rumor, is that there might be more. With that said, Johns Hopkins is going to get things started this Saturday, hosting Robert Morris at noon. Again, weather permitting, I guess, is the words that we have to use with that. Coach, always appreciate you taking the time for us. Best of luck as the season goes on. We'll, of course, be checking in as you do. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks for having me.